Okay, the SEM is pumping down. So it'll be a minute or so before I have low enough vacuum to actually show a picture. And in the meantime, you can stare at this TKF roundtable advertisement for tomorrow. So I'm very excited about this, and I know that Pacific Plankton and Dell and Constababble are also very excited about our roundtable talk for tomorrow. So we hope everybody could take a little time out of their schedule to check in with us. We will be talking about the value of science communication under different platforms, and we'll also be sort of talking a little bit about climate change issues, I think. And shortly after the roundtable, we're going to do some sort of like Jackbox challenge between the 4 panelists. So I'm very excited about it, and we were poking around a little bit last night trying to make sure that the scene system works. And some Pangolin, some diatoms are round, so it could be like a round diatom-like table. Yeah, diatoms are just like little tiny goats, exactly. Good afternoon, Micah, and good morning to little Chook. And let's see. I guess they might consume plastics, Tech Relic. Not on purpose, but I think goats eat it on purpose. Yeah, the climate change thing is a little, like there's no good name to put it. If you call it global warming, then people are like, well, in some places it's getting colder. Sometimes it's not just the temperature that's an issue as well. So, good morning to Pacific Plankton as well. And it looks like I have enough vacuum to start the image. So give me a second while I'm setting it up. And I have some new samples. I don't think I've looked at any of these in the SEM before. I've looked at them in the light microscope. And so I don't know what we'll find today. I'm looking for some Diplomace, which is another one of the 2 major genera in East Africa that my friend Itzi and I are working to characterize a little bit better. So the Diplomace is her specialization, and one of the groups that she knows best, and she's currently working on they've published a book on just Diplomace very recently. So let's see. I'm just going to do some quick calibrations. I guess I could do that with the screen showing. You voted for the Great Climate Reckoning. I like that one. I didn't really get to vote either. I think nobody did. People just sort of, as a community, started using different terminology. So, okay, so I think this is the one I want. Yeah. Oh, here we are. Hello. I have a slightly different camera today. I stole one from one of the classrooms, and as a result, there's a little bit more of the lab that you can see. I can't get big enough to sort of reach completely off of the screen, which is nice. You can kind of see back here is this sort of messy tables that I prepare material for, and there's some cabinets back there on this side that are hiding behind these walls that are storing like 1,000 National Geographic magazines for some purpose. I don't know what. Micah wants to know what is the era name that my former mentor coined and that I use in my paper. I think the mentor you're talking about. Ooh, forgot to turn down my volume. That's a good reminder. Thank you for the follow. Fejexi. And I think the mentor that you're talking about, Micah, is Gene Stormer. So he's a very famous diatom taxonomist, and he coined the term, along with another person, Anthropocene, or sometimes people say Anthropocene or something like that. That people say it different ways. I always sort of just change up the way I say it so that nobody can ever figure out what's the right way. Let's see. So in our field of view right now are actually a bunch of sponge spicules. They're all over the place in here. And as I mentioned, I think this is the filament heating needs to be adjusted. I think this is the first time that I've looked at these samples in the SEM. I came in a little bit early this morning and did some preparation with the rinsing the samples a little bit, because that's usually the biggest problem for me with samples that we just get, is that they have either a lot of organic matter in them still, even after we process them, or they've got a lot of clay in them. And clay is sort of the bane of the scanning electron microscope world, because it's fine and it floats down after all of your particles are settled and already on the stub, and sort of coats everything like a blanket. And as a result, the SEM looks at the topography, the surface features of whatever you're looking at in it. And if you put a blanket of clay over top of everything, what you see is a blanket of clay. In a light microscope slide, the clay is basically opaque, and so we never really have to worry about it. We don't really see that sort of thing. Oh, thank you for the follow, Base Coat Stories. Yeah, the living stuff also gets in the way as well, Pacific plankton, but it's mostly the clays that create our sort of our biggest adversaries in those conditions, because we can't see anything if there's clay on top of it. Organic matter sort of creates a different set of problems. And then there's also this problem. You can kind of see if we zoom way out like this, so we're zoomed way, way out, you can see I put a little too much in the middle, and so there's like a clump of these sponge spicules and whatever else here, and then so sometimes things will get buried underneath other things. One of the things that's sort of cool about this, though, is you can see all of these sort of toothpick-like sort of things in here, and then also there's some that are kind of like a bent hot dog, like this guy. These are also sponge spicules, so this sample is just like packed full of sponge spicules. That's a sponge spicule. These ones that are like toothpick shaped are sponge spicules as well. Here's a piece of one, here's a piece of one. So they're just all over in our field of view. And here's like a little spiny one. And so it's sort of cool to be able to see all of these sponge spicules in scanning electron microscope. And I just clicked past something that I wanted to see, which is this thing. So a diatom, but this one's a little broken and dissolved, but this is the genus that I was going to be sort of poking around for today. It's sort of good to get a sense of the size of it, so we can find full ones, the ones that aren't dissolved. We know roughly what we're looking for, and at what magnification I should be hiding. Here's another one. I should be hovering at it, rather. Because with the SEM, we can kind of just zoom in and out to all different levels, and it's important that we don't... if we're looking for little things, sometimes it's hard to tell how little we should be focusing on, and sometimes we miss the big things as a result. So here's a nice big Cyclotella cucumis. No, sorry, Cimbella cucumis. Still waking up a little this morning, I guess. Also, we're still not in our optimal position for analyzing stuff on the light or on the SEM. For diatoms, I'd like to be a lot closer than where we are. That's a piece of a phytolith, I believe. And there's another sponge spicule. So it's like there's just tons of other types of silica on the slide that aren't diatoms. And I believe these are pieces of volcanic ash, tephra, as it's usually called, as well. So we're seeing bits and pieces of those sort of mixed in with our material. And that just is something that happens when you have samples that were near where volcanic eruptions occur relatively frequently. And then as a result, a little bit of volcanic ash gets on the landscape and then eventually works its way into lake systems. So some of it goes directly into the lakes. And it's valuable for us in a lot of ways, actually, because a lot of times the volcanic eruptions can be dated to a specific eruption, and then those can be further resolved in time for us. And that actually allows us to figure out how old some of our materials are. And in the East African Rift, sometimes that's one of the best tools that we have for putting an age on a sample, because there's a lot of volcanic events, and most of them are pretty well characterized in time. So that's a nice, simple way for us to connect our sedimentary samples with some past time frame. And of course, these were collected from modern samples, so the volcanoes don't help us. They're just a little bit of extra junk that gets in our way in this case, but doesn't mean we can't appreciate them for sometimes helping us a lot. So, as I mentioned, we're still not at an ideal height, so I'm going to fix that now. And if you've been to the stream before, you'll note that I've mentioned many times this is really the only dangerous part of using the SEM. Generally, it's very low possibility that you can break things with it, because the Tescan Vega 3 is set up in such a way that we don't typically have problems with that. It's pretty simple to use, but when you are moving the stage up, the samples get very close to the pole piece, and as a result, if it touches it, things could go bad. And oftentimes I will be completely distracted by that and need to focus entirely on changing the height and nothing else. So now you can see we can get a nice clean image a lot closer up. And I also haven't played with all of the settings correctly, so we're still not, as I mentioned, in what I consider to be ideal settings for everything. But I did see another Diplomace. So here's one, and here's one. And this one has a little bit of junk on it, and I'm being kind of picky, but I probably shouldn't be, because I don't know how many good views I'll have in these samples of them. But this one doesn't look like it has very much, well, it still has some junk on it here and here. Also not great, but it's a little bit smaller. So I'm going to, focus is looking pretty sharp. I'm going to fix the brightness for you, and also for me. And while that's happening, I will hop over for a second and see if anything good's going on in the channel. Yeah, the wobble and the stigmation still haven't been managed, Pacific. So, but I don't want to do it on clay. I want to do it on a nice clean sample. And also maybe this one isn't the best one to start with as a result. This is a big Cyclostephanos, very interesting diatom. This one probably doesn't have a name, or it has a name, but it's like a CF name. I think maybe it needs a little bit of work taxonomically, and maybe when we're done with all of these things and the Afrocymbellas, we can come back and take a look at some of these other things that also still need work. I mean to start actually on sample number 1, so I'm going to move us over there. Some reason I started on the highest number instead of the lowest number. You can see there's a whole bunch of these big Cirrellas on our inner field of view, and also I was a little clumpy with the material in this sample as well, by putting a bunch of stuff in the middle of the slide or stub. But there's some really cool stuff here. Let's see what we have. So this is one of the diatoms that used to be classified as Sematoplura, and was then basically moved into Cirrella with basically all of the Sematopluras, except for I think just a few. It has this really sort of wavy surface, which used to be the characteristic that separated the two genera. But they decided that there was too many of the Cirrella that also had sort of wavy surfaces, and so it wasn't a very good feature to focus on. And then when they looked at them genetically, they couldn't really, the wavy surface didn't seem to be something that broke them apart genetically. So they decided that these were likely not good characters for us to break things out in a genus. And they probably need some further revision. They probably will eventually get broken into some different genera, but they sort of like lump them back together for now because they want them to be mostly representative of things that we understand as being monophyletic. And so, and what that means is basically all of the things that belong in that group kind of fit together naturally, and they don't have elements that don't belong, or features that don't belong in that group, and or don't share things with other groups that make them difficult to distinguish. So I'm going to play with the normal things that I play with now, which is the wobble, to try to see if our wobble is good. And it doesn't seem to be moving, so I'm okay with that. And now I can just sort of tweak the stigmation a bit. And then once that's cleaned up, we can get on with talking and taking pictures and whatever else it is we're going to do today. Looking around in my slides. This step needs to be higher. So the stigmation is basically a type of sort of micro-focusing where I make the round stuff appear to be round, and hopefully ultimately I have the image quality at its highest state that we can manage. And right now one of the issues is my beam intensity is a little too high for me to clearly see what I'm doing. I want it to be 7. And then I can kind of tweak these a little bit better. I think that's probably as good as it can be for now. So, actually this is another thing we could look closely at. So here's a Stephanodiscus, I believe, or Cyclostephanos. And when the stigmation is in the best position it can be, these things look really good. So this is a good place for me to kind of hang out and see how well I can get my stigmation. a little bit better, maybe. So these things will look like little salt and pepper shakers when you have the stigmation perfect. And so they're nice elements for us to focus on. To try to tweak it. That's pretty good. And we can always play this game with the SEM where you sort of like tweak it forever, but really what I want is we were super zoomed in. We were at, let's see, when we're up here, we're at 100,000 times magnification. So if I can get it looking good at 100,000 times, it's gonna look really sharp when I zoom out to like 30,000 times. So like here, and I can put this right in the center. Slow the beam down so you can actually see the structure of those little salt and pepper shaker heads. And I can do my auto brightness and contrast. So the little salt and pepper shaker heads are called cribra, and they're a type of occlusion, which is just a fancy science word for saying that it blocks over an opening. And the occlusion that they function for is actually the areolae, which are little holes on the valve face, and they're only called cribra when they're on the inside of the diatom, and they're composed of a bunch of little holes like these that look like little salt and pepper shaker heads. And it's pretty much a characteristic that you find in the Stephanodisciacea group, and that only those will have them, where they're actually sort of like a dome, or sort of inwardly deflected little coverings over these pores. And the other openings that you see, this one, you can see that it has 4 little sort of slot-like openings adjacent to it. These are called satellite pores, and you can see that in this case there's 4. There's a central tube, and then 4 of these little openings around it. And because this is on the valve face, this feature is called a photoportula, or sometimes just referred to as a strutted process. And the idea is it has little struts associated with each one of these pores. And so in this case, it has 4 satellite pores, or pori. And you can see that the one down here also has 4 around the opening. So 4 little slots that make it look kind of like clover-shaped or square. But this one only has 3. And so for this group, that's sort of typical. They either have 3 little openings, or they have 4 openings. And if they have 3, it looks triangular. If they have 4, it looks like a square. But those are the same features. They're valve face photoportula. So that's the name that we give these structures. And they're distinct for this group. And again, normally, when we see them, they represent like a feature that we can use that's usually pretty consistent for the diatom. So I had that sort of nicely in focused, and then decided I wanted to zoom out a little, and I didn't like what I did when I zoomed out. So we will Slow the speed down a bit. See what we can do about getting that nice and sharp again. I didn't really change the focus, so it should be fine. I'll tweak the brightness and contrast, and then I'm just going to take a nice long picture of this, and we can kind of chat a little bit while it's being collected. So this isn't anything that I actually need for any sort of analyses. It's just sort of, it looks cool and I like it. So sometimes I'll just stop and take pictures of things because they look cool. And I think I can lower this down to 6 or maybe even 5 and still be okay. It's just going to improve the quality of the image a little bit. Because it looks kind of grainy to me. And you can see this is what it looks like with the beam intensity 7, this is what it looks like with the beam intensity 6, and this is what it looks like with the beam intensity of 5. And all that's doing is basically decreasing the width of the beam, or the area of the surface that's being affected by the beam. And if it's a smaller area, basically we get a higher resolution image out of it. So maybe I need to tweak the brightness again just a little bit. And if at this point I feel like if it's grainy, I'll just manage it with Photoshop later and try to reduce some of the graininess. So, because I don't want to have to wait for a speed 9 image, which takes a half hour to collect. While it would be interesting as an experiment for us to sit through, it would be like a mostly chatting stream where nothing else happened. Okay, I'm coming back. I'm coming. I'm here. Let's see. Hello, Dangling / breaded shrimp. How are you doing? Yeah, there was a Cirrella. Where are the other lab people today? Well, on Saturdays I've been basically all by myself, which is got pluses and minuses. I told Mallory that if she wanted her weekends, she didn't need to be here. And I think she took it like, don't come in, which isn't actually what I meant, but also fine. And the rest of them, well, who knows? They're, they come and go. Addie will probably be back on Wednesday for some more sort of work on her project. And I think maybe Laura will be joining Addie and I. Laura's another grad student that I have who started with me this semester, and she's from Columbia. And so she's just learning diatoms a little bit more and working on a project with me and Dr. McLew. Flower portula. I like little flowers. Thank you for handling shout-out Pacific Plankton. And hello, Andalor. How are you doing? Well, it was easy to catch up with chat at least. So right now we're looking at the valve face, an internal view. So when you're looking at stuff in the scanning electron microscope, there's an internal and external component to think about. And this is an internal view. And the diatom that we're looking at belongs to the genus Cyclostephanos. And it's one of those diatom genera groups where they took two existing genera that share features with this thing, and then they smushed them together. So it's like a thing that we do frequently in the diatom world. It's got some characteristics of Cyclotella, and it has some characteristics of Stephanodiscus, and so they just call it Cyclostephanos. There is, to add to the confusion, an old name that they used, which was Stephanocyclus. This is Cyclostephanos, and there's a Stephanocyclus to make it so that this just like absolutely baffling. But the name for Stephanocyclus isn't used anymore. It's been basically dismissed as a genus, or it would be its own genus, except the species that they put into it as the base species got made into the base species, the base name species for Cyclotella. So the problem is that they can't actually move it out of Cyclotella. And to add to the confusion, the other stuff that was in Cyclotella has now basically been moved out of it. So they basically have, just by doing that, have made Cyclotella the name that would have been Stephanocyclus. So super confusing combination of things people did, decisions people made, and some of them were clearly not very good ones, that they thought they were doing the right thing at the time, but now we found that they definitely weren't the right thing. And it's one of the caveats, basically, of taxonomy, which is don't make things permanent that could potentially come back to bite us later. And it seems like every time we try to conserve a name in taxonomy, where we just basically say, okay, we know this is the not the right thing to do, but we're going to go ahead and make it the right thing to do, it always ends up coming back to bite us later, as we should have just did the right thing at the beginning, and then we wouldn't have so much confusion around stuff. So it's long story short, this is Cyclostephanos now, and the characteristics for Cyclostephanos, so if you just saw this view, you wouldn't actually know whether we were looking at Stephanodiscus or Cyclostephanos. So nothing in our field of view right now would give that away. What does give it away is the things that are close to the margins of the diatom, and I'll show you those in 3 minutes when this stops loading, downloading this sort of image a little bit by little bit, right? So it's not like a web page where it's trying to use all my computer resources to download an image, but rather it's building the image for us. So every bit of line that you see that's being added is being added one pixel at a time as it scans across the surface very slowly. How is taxonomy funding in the U.S.? Generally, taxonomy funding in the U.S. is very poor, and it creates problems for people because we don't have a lot of support for the taxonomy. People like me, I'm primarily, like, most of my funding is through paleoecology, and so I do sort of taxonomy as a thing that I do on the side because there's not a lot of funding support for it directly. So, and I'm fortunate to have my own scanning electron microscope. So basically all I need is some material, and I can get the materials from the cores that I look at. But there are a lot of questions in taxonomy that can't get resolved, in part because we don't fund it very well. So, right. Rams Reef asks, are you and Pacific Plankton close in location? We are not. Yeah, taxonomy is my side hustle. It's one of my side hustles. One of my many side hustles, apparently. No, but we did a really cool stream for Pacific Plankton's stream on Thursday. So if you have a chance to go back and look at the VOD for that, you should check it out, because I was a surprise guest. I was a surprise guest on her stream and was there for the whole stream, and I basically did Mallory's job while I was there. Mallory's job when she's here, not Mallory's job for her. So. Trying to get a shout out for Jonathan's Gamecast. Yeah, it was nice. It was basically we just used Discord so that I could chat, and also she could chat, and people could hear us both, which is nice. And I suppose I could do that on the weekends here with in reverse with Pacific Plankton, but I thought I would wait till next weekend to do that because she sent me some materials, and they're supposed to be arriving on Tuesday, which means they probably won't be ready for the stream on Wednesday, but they would be ready for the stream on Saturday. So provided that I have a stream on Saturday next week, it will be looking at some material from San Francisco Bay again, and then it would be nice to have Pacific Plankton on, and she could just be my instead of having to type stuff, she could just be here talking like I do. We won't be able to see her, but we'll be able to hear her. I could also set up a Zoom thing where she could talk, but the problem is that this computer that we're using isn't perfect for that setup. So this is ETC 068. I see we got a new follow, but I didn't get to see what it was because I'm busy typing. So if it was you that just followed, know that I appreciate it. I just can't see it at the second. And this is just, let's see. Cyclo. Stephanos. Cribra. Also, it's good to get a little photograph in so I can sort of test to see how well it's handling everything. We're going to dump the beam intensity back to 10 and fix the brightness really quickly. And then I'm going to start zooming around looking for things. Hopefully some Diplomace. So part of the reason I picked these samples is because in the light microscope I saw... Oops, that wasn't the thing that I want, but that looked like it was pretty cool. I think it's a Placanese. Yeah, that's a Placanese. So not the diatom I want, but the diatom I got in my field of view here. This is Placanese because Placanese is only supposed to have... So Placanese is another... This is, again, some of the confusion around diatom genera names. Placanese only has a single row of areolae, so these are biseriate. In other words, there's two striae in each row, 2 rows of areolae in each striae, rather. And you can see that's the way it is all the way around and all the whole valve. So, cool diatom, but I'm not going to focus on it. I'm going to try to be good and look for the thing that I'm supposed to find. Here's a cool little gyrosigma. Oh, and I actually think that's the Diplomace that I want. We can see its external view. There's the raphe in the central nodule. Oh wait, this is the internal view, I think. Yeah, internal view. Let's see what we have here. Oh, nope, that's not a Diplomace. Also, I feel like maybe I could still tweak this image a little bit. We'll see. Oh, it's just because it wasn't on 7. You can see how much difference the beam intensity makes. That's not... I'm actually not sure what the genus is that we're looking at right here. Some sort of interesting slots on the outside edges. In the central area, it looks very like Celophoroid, but the valve ends do not. These look like monoraphid. So I guess I'll have to just keep my eye open and try to figure out what that is. these big plates that you're seeing here, that are sort of squarish at times, all of these sort of big flat pieces that you're seeing, those aren't diatoms. Those are actually chips of muscovite, which is a mineral that creates sort of a sheet-like, so it's a sheet-like, it's called a cleavage plane. They have what's called perfect cleavage, which is a funny name if you think about the other terminology for cleavage. But for geologists, it just means that it comes off in perfect sheets like this. And when I was putting the sample on to the stub, I noticed it because it sparkles. It's like glitter, basically. When you have it in sediments like these, it just ends up being like when you shake up the sample, it looks like snow globe or glitter, basically. So the sample was glittery when I put it on the stub, and I was like, oh, that's some muscovite in there. And you can actually see the muscovite, which is cool. I know I always promise to turn on the EDAX one of these times and then never do, because it doesn't broadcast onto that screen very easily. So it will be a challenge. Some really cool phytolith. Looks like teeth. But we could actually look at its mineralogy if we did that and figure out what the elemental composition is. But I can promise you it's muscovite, and I already know what its elemental composition is, so won't worry about it. Here's another little cool diatom. Again, it's a Cirrella, and it's like a little peanut. You can see those little striae right there. This is sort of really subtle lines going across with holes. But that is such a pretty looking diatom that I feel like I need to stop and take a picture, which happens, I guess, too frequently. I turned it. This still needs to be rotated just a little bit. Just about perfect. Okay. Let's get this right. These little holes. I want those perfectly in focus for us. And then I can zoom back out and take a picture of this. One of the things that's kind of neat, hanging out right here on the edge of this one, a little diatom landed on top of it, so you can see big mothership sort of diatom. This one's probably 100 microns across, and then there's this little tiny diatom that's just sitting here on the side, chilling out, hanging out on it. Also out here you can see the striae very clearly is these sort of little grains or whatever, like wood grain on the surface, but those are those little holes that we lined up and got in perfect focus. So this is a good one. So I'm just going to, beam intensity is too high. That will just fix everything for us, I hope. Yeah, I see the brightness is fixed as I turn down the beam intensity a little, and we ought to be able to see the holes on here just a little bit better. Little areolae on the valve face. Very nice. I can pop back into chat and say hello. Yeah, I don't think Placanese are in the U.S. Pacific. I think they only occur in... actually, maybe they are in the U.S. I don't know. I forget. But they just aren't on the website yet. Yes. Diatoms do photosynthesize, John, and Pacific plankton is totally capable of handling those kinds of questions. Diatoms make the best channel emotes. I agree, especially if I can just add a little mustache onto them. And then I do get rid of all of the living material by... These were processed in nitric acid to get rid of all of the cellular material. So all that's left behind was basically the skeletons. And hello, District 10 mushrooms. How are you doing? Cleavage is called cleavage because it splits the chest, so it has the same root as cleavage, yes. It's only funny if you're a little kid, I guess. And you're thinking, oh, this mineral has cleavage. Hello, Mama Bon Bon. And yes, everything we're looking at is long dead. These were collected in 2017. And diatoms have a lifespan of something like a couple of months, maybe, usually, or less. I guess some of them might live a bit longer. So even if they were alive when they were collected, they would be long dead by now. Some of the diatoms are already mustache-shaped. And they would look weird if I added a second mustache onto them. This little diatom that's hanging out here is a Nitzia. This big one that we're looking at is a Cirrella, which would have been classified as a Cimatopleura. So, but it's now a Cirrella. And this little Nitzia has always been a Nitzia. You can tell it's a Nitzia because it has these little openings along one side only. And in Cirrella, it has those openings around both sides. So these are called fibulae, the little openings that you see here. The lines going across the surface are striae. The little holes that make up the lines are called areolae. And then this thing has a raphe, which runs around the outside edge, a circumferential raphe. And the little Nitzia has one raphe that just runs around one edge. So it's usually referred to as a keel raphe when it just has one on the side. This is Cirrella. And that's Nitzia. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out. And we'll start exploring, looking for... I'm looking today mostly for these sort of oval-shaped diatoms. They're almost always oval-shaped, but in the marine realm, sometimes they're peanut-shaped. Peanut-shaped, actually, there's a word that we use for peanut-shaped things in diatom lingo, and that is penduriform. So if you weren't here to learn language, and you're wondering why we fixated on it so much, like telling you the different terminology, whatever else, it's because we have so many different shapes with diatoms that we have to have sort of like very particular shape names for things. And all the little features that are on them basically help us figure out, like we call them this, we figure out what they're called, and then we use those terminology to help us characterize them. That's a weird diatom. This is an Ensynema. Here's a little Stephanodiscus. This is an Olicosyra. They just look like a little tube, but when you zoom in, you can see that there's actually... this is one whole cell right here, and half of a sibling attached to it by these spines. And I just wanted to take a second to show you something about this while we're here. So I can get those spines perfectly in focus and zoom in on them. There's a little sheet sitting over top of this, which is the girdle band right here, and it's blocking these holes, which are the areolae. But what I want you to focus on is these. You see these little spines? They look like, like the head of the queen in a chessboard maybe, or something like that. They have like a flanged out surface. They're basically like a little spatula with a point on it, and they fit together perfectly from one valve to the other. So these are sibling valves that are adjacent to each other in a colony, and these spines are called linking spines because they, like knuckles, like you put your knuckles together like this, you can't really pull your hands apart anymore. And that's basically what they're doing, right? They're knuckled together, and they're very hard to separate the diatom. So they're referred to as linking spines. And what's cool about this is diatoms can make two different kinds of spines. So the linking spines hold these valves together, and they can make another type of spine on the same species and the very same colony called a separation spine. And they do this in response to their environment. So they can tell that the colony's too long and it's sinking too fast, or the nutrients in the water column that are around them are high, and so they want to replicate so they can basically stay in the light when the water column is full of the nutrients that they need. And so they sense around them something's going on that's not good, and they want to basically be where the nutrients and the light are at their maximum. So instead of using this sort of linking spines like this, they create something that are called separation spines, which are a bit more like this. And the separation spines can be pulled apart very easily, and you can tell the difference between them, just like my fingers and my knuckles, right? Because these ones are basically little pointy fingers, and they allow the colony to be separated. And so what's super cool about this particular image is you can see that this diatom right here, this one, that's a whole valve of the diatom. This is a whole frustule, both valves. So here's one, here's the other. On one side of it, it made linking spines, and on the other side of it, it made separation spines. So this particular diatom made the decision, I'm going to have to cause the colony to separate and to make a new space for a new colony, or allow it to be a lighter colony. And it's split right here. The colony actually split there. And this one got ripped in half, that diatom did, but the colony, when it was together, split along this actual diatom right here. And there it has its linking spines on one side and separation spines on the opposite side. And so it's like the decider for the colony, right? It made the decision that for whatever reason we should stop sinking, and we need to be in the water column. And I am anthropomorphizing a little bit when I say it's making a decision, because it's just responding to its environment. But what a brilliant strategy it has, that it can replicate, and one diatom in that chain basically can cause this sort of thing to happen, right? Where you get both responses going on the same frustule of the organism. I don't know. To me, that's really cool that it's made that adjustment. It's responding to the environment, and it's thinking like a colony, like it's making decisions for the colony. And these cells are clones. All of them in a row are a clone, but there's not really any communication between them, or not that we know of. So it's really confusing how that happens. It's a really sort of baffling prospect that this diatom, when it was forming, made separation spines because it decided the colony was too long. It can't tell how long the colony is. It's just responding to the actual environment around it. And you can see that right there in these spines and those spines, just on the same cell. So it's kind of a neat sort of like thing we don't understand about diatoms. Like, how did it figure out, my turn, I'm going to make one of these things instead of one of those things? So kind of neat to think that algae are this sort of like, I don't know, receptive or perceptive in their environment to make decisions and sort of function as a colonial organism, even at the like single cell level. So I'm going to capture that image. It's not the only Oligocyra that does that. It's not, the species isn't sort of special in any way. All of the Oligocyra make those kinds of colonial sort of decisions, or I don't know what else you'd call it, but it's kind of a really cool idea. Let's see. Can electronics from the microscope kill or harm fungus? Yes. Everything in there is a vacuum, so any sort of fungus is not going to live. It would have to be dead going in, probably, because to get in it, it has to be sputter coated with gold. So, yeah. Let's see. You are a man, you are always like a little kid, so you're always having fun, are you not? I am always having fun, yes. I don't know if it has anything to do with being a man, but I like my job, and I think it means that I get to have fun all the time. So, if they're alive, would anybody look at them under electron microscope, or would electrons harm them? Yeah, I mean, everything that happens inside of there happens in a vacuum. So nothing living usually goes into or comes out of a scanning electron microscope. If it's in there, it doesn't last for long as living. Scientists like having fun. See some of those species names, yeah. Pandoriform is, yeah, like a lute or a guitar shape, or like a figure 8 kind of a shape. Yeah. Yeah, like dovetail joints. That's actually a good way of thinking of them. Like, dovetail joints are the strongest type of joint that you can make for a piece of wood. And these are really good at holding the diatom colony together. And if you think of them a little bit like that, right? And then you look at so this is the join between one valve and the next valve of the same cell. So that's one whole diatom. And this is the sister diatom. And this is something that we often see when you have the linking spines. This diatom fundamentally is more likely to get ripped in half, like actually ripped in half, like break along this boundary, than it is to break along this boundary. And so when we find them and count them in samples, like fossil samples, I can find stuff from, like, millions of years ago. The two sister halves of the valve will be joined together still, and the almost always they're broken like this. It would more likely to be ripped in half than it is to actually separate along those spines. So. Go. It's a cool little picture, and I think maybe I will also get one zoomed in on these spines, because I think they're kind of neat looking. And you can also see into the actual pores in here, which is also a cool sort of view. And I don't want to totally there's a little bit of junk up here I'm trying to avoid, but I like to compose the picture, but I also want a little bit of the girdle band itself up there, because that texture is kind of neat. So yeah, here we can actually see all the things I want to see. The actual spines, the little bit of the girdle up here at the top, and then into the actual pores, so we can see that they have some sort of a structure inside of them, an occlusion of some type in here. And they're kind of neat. They look like little, I don't know, mushrooms or something. The pores are covered though, right? You can see that. This is the opening from the outside of the diatom. And you can see all the way down into the hole, there's something covering it on the inside, right? These little things are always here. So this is sort of a neat shot. I mean, it's a scanning electron microscope, so almost everything's a neat shot, but particularly like this view. Okay, what's chat have to say? Sarah Holcomb, hello, how are you doing? This is such a cool example of their process. Yeah, thank you. Oh, no problem. I'm looking for a book or an article on living diatom cells and the stuff inside. I don't actually know any books like that. I need to go looking around for some books because I wanted to talk a little bit about diatom structure and like architecture, and I need to find that book or access to that book that where they talk about that. It's always important to have fun. I'm a female goat farmer, so I always have fun. I mean, having fun at your job makes it so that you kind of go in every day and like what you do. So, I mean, not everybody has that option for sure. And so I really appreciate being able to come in, like my job, have fun with what I do, have fun teaching and doing science and educating people and outreach. Otherwise, why would I be here on a Saturday, like hanging out in the lab, showing you guys what's going on? I could be at home sleeping in or whatever it is I might want to do. Also, it's kind of frozen here. There's not a whole lot I want to do more than this. But let's see. We've got a follow. I wasn't paying attention when it happened. John Incogni, thank you for the follow. And Rodrigo A, thank you for the follow. And also Raul S. Cooper, thank you for the follows. Let's see. What's your question, Dangling? Hello, I'm an artist, and I am simply amazed by your pictures and how beautiful and perfect these forms and structures are. Thank you. Surtoy? I actually think there's a lot to sort of showcase at the microscopic level, the sort of art and textures. And so the pictures that you see in the sort of slideshow down there where I've colorized them is sort of me trying to hopefully sort of showcase some of those textures. And I think by adding color, it kind of makes it a little bit more accessible to people who sort of are used to looking at things in color. But I really enjoy the sort of artistry, photography of what I do. And in my spare time, I'm also a photographer. So this part is something that I, getting the images to look good and focus to be just right is actually, it seems like I'm being nitpicky, but it's basically just how I am when I do photography as well. So close up, just put that there. This is really beautiful, I think. And you wouldn't think of it if you were just looking at this image from where we were zoomed out, that there was so much going on that was interesting on some little stick-shaped diatom. But when you have it in the scanning electron microscope and you can see the detail, I sort of feel like it really helps characterize a lot of the best, most interesting features. And thinking about like how small everything is in the field of view that we're looking at, like you would not be able to see any of these things without a really powerful microscope like this. So to me, that's part of the cool part about it. It's something that's completely invisible to the average person, and yet has so much sort of stunning sort of texture, and you can get so many really sort of high quality images out of it. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us in the channel. Any artists are always welcome. I have a lot of artists from the Twitch community that are regulars in my channel, like Little Chook. Also, I don't know if we gave Little Chook a shout out, so now might be a good time for that. And then Miss Daisy D. Sometimes they send me materials to put on the scanning electron microscope even, because they're just kind of curious, what does something look like zoomed real far in. And I keep meaning to mention, I still haven't gotten I got an artist friend, Jay Renzella, who's another Twitch streamer who does wood carving, and they're sending me one of their wood carving tools that's dull. Like they've been using it to carve, and they want to see the blade dull, and then basically have me pop open the chamber, sharpen it, and then put it back in and show it sharp and sort of see how it differs. So I'm going to do that as soon as I get the materials from him, and I'm still sort of waiting, but hopefully they'll be here this week as well. So might have a busy stream next week, trying to get everything that I want to get done. But I think he lives in Taiwan, or yeah, I think it's Taiwan. So it's taking a while to get here. It's a little Stephanodiscus. You can see the little tiny spines associated with basically each one of these little spokes coming out of the middle. These are called interfascicles or costae, and these things are called fascicles, or rows of areolae sort of clumped together between the costae. And then I just wanted to focus on it for a split second. If you look, one of these is not like the others. There's this one. All of these spines, these are all spines going around. And that one's different. It's a little fatter, and also at the top it's open, and it looks hollow. And that's because this actually belongs to a process called a Photoportula, whereas these all are basically surface ornamentations. They're just like little solid cones of silica that are stuck on the surface. But that one actually is a tube that goes into the inside of the diatom. It comes out with a little lip-shaped or mouth-shaped process. It doesn't move. I just made a mouth for fun. But and then these little tubes that are out here that are underneath each one of the spines are Mantle Photoportula. So we saw valve face Photoportula earlier, and if they're out here on the edge or the shoulder of the diatom, we refer to that as the mantle, and these are Mantle Photoportula. So inside of these would be one of those sort of tubes with the little slots around it, and it would either have 3 or 4 or 2 slots around it. These are the strutted processes. So these are used usually to sort of exude some material to slow down their descent in plankton. These are plankton, and I don't know what this thing does, to be honest. Photoportulas are thought to be instrumental in helping the valve for centric diatoms like this one to split along the middle. So when they're dividing, they think they're used for an anchor point. You can see there's a Photoportula. I thought I'd just zoom down to this Stephanodiscus real quick and show it. So this is a Stephanodiscus, and that is a Photoportula. It's a, like I said, sort of a mouth-shaped slot. And I don't know that these are the same species that we're looking at, because this one's kind of big, but they're close. So that little opening right there on the little guy that we were looking at up here, that one, would be associated with this little tube right here. So it comes in, or on the outside it looks like this, on the inside it looks like that sort of slot. And that's for, those are both Stephanodiscus. That's a Stephanodiscus, and the other one's a Stephanodiscus. But it sort of give you a sense of the positioning of where this sort of ring of spines are. And if we were to go back down and look at this one, you'll see that the valve face is covered with a bunch of areolae with dome cribra, and then the strutted processes for these are off on the shoulder here, so they're really hard to see. But here's some. So you can see there's a central tube, and there's 4 little slots around this one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Right? They're basically sitting here at this sort of edge, and they're below the position of the spine, which means if we were to go back and look at the spines, are probably right around here on the valve face for these, and then these are below them. If we were to go back and look at that Photoportula at the top of this thing here, you can see where this is roughly where the rest of the spines would be located. And then there's the position of the strutted process, the Mantle Photoportulas. And so this is the elevation of the spines all the way around. Usually it's where the areolae go from 2 to 3, or in some cases 4, 5, or 6. But it's usually right where that transition happens. So they're sort of positioned It's a question to me why diatoms make spines. They don't seem to be particularly functional for anything. And it's like a question I keep asking. None of my colleagues know an answer to either. So it's not like a great mystery or anything. It's just like a point of confusion. Like, what's the spine doing? It doesn't make the diatom any bigger. It doesn't seem to serve any real function for us that makes any sense. At best, maybe it sort of helps reorient the diatom as it falls through the water or something. I don't know. I don't know that people have explored it very much, but it's like a weird phenomenon that they have these ornamentations on them that don't seem to do anything. Why invest so much energy in something that does nothing? So I actually didn't find any Diplomace on this sample. But that's okay. I've got a lot of other samples. So I'm going to move now to sample 2. This one, this is similar to 70 or 80, whatever was in the middle. 80, like full of sponge spicules. So these long things are sponge spicules. All these sort of weird little things are sponge spicules. And I'm going to kind of get out of the middle because I got clumps of stuff in the middle. I noticed as I was zooming around, there's... Oh, wait, it's down here. There's a diatom sitting up on a piece of material, and there's one down here as well. Aha! This actually gives you a nice view, edge view of Cirrella, I think. Here. We're right on the edge. And you can see the structure of it from the side, right? So if we were careful and we zoomed in somewhere in here, we'd probably be able to see the infundibula, which is basically the fancy little hole that goes through the outside, connects to their raphe channel. There's a bunch of these in here, actually. So here's one down here as well. I think maybe they're actually Kimplodiscus, but I'm not positive. And this one actually is there actually is a Diplomace here that's not covered with junk. It's got a bit of a friendly sponge spicule on the side, but no junk covering the valve face that I can see. So I'm gonna focus on it a bit. And you can see really clearly onto the raphe and the central nodule for this diatom. This is characteristic behavior or structure for a Diplomace, which is that their raphe, which is this little slot right here, fits inside of a canal on the inside. So it's like a little channel that the raphe fits in. And they usually have sort of a big bulging central nodule on the inside, and then these sort of costi-like structures between all of the areolae. So this is a nice clear image of that. Beam intensity needs to be knocked down, and my speed needs to be ramped up, and probably brightness needs to be adjusted. And then it's been a while. I can come back to chat. I'm coming. Don't worry. Just want to get a couple of pictures of some important things here, and then I can hear your questions and see what you have to say. This is nice. It looks like everything's going to turn out pretty well with the quality and the focus. So really pretty. This is probably one of the species that we're ultimately going to have to name. So what's on the slideshow? Oh, sorry. Yeah, District 10, there's no way I can keep up with the slideshow. Maybe take a screenshot of it and post it somewhere in the Discord, maybe. Greetings from Spain. Oh, thank you, Raul. And thanks for the follow earlier. Oh, you're a streamer. Cool. And thanks for all the shout outs for people. It was like a long list of shout outs you did for me there. I think that art and science have a lot in common, and I definitely enjoy your channel. Thank you for showing us this invisible to the naked eye beauty. Well, you're welcome. Let's see. Increasing surface area. Yeah, I guess it's a possibility, Pacific Plankton. I don't think it's because it looks pretty, but you never know. Yes, the one that we were looking at before, the Cirrella or Discus, has a circumferential raphe on the side. So, Wind Bunny wonders if the diatom spines also help them keep a big bubble of personal space for resources. I don't know. The diatoms sort of like that have those spines are almost always floating, although there are some benthic diatoms that have spines. And they just sort of float through the water column. And they're not usually in such high densities that they're going to like bump into something else. It's really confusing why they would need them. I mean, they're too small to have a major impact on anything that would probably eat it. It's not like you'd go to eat a diatom and bite into it and be like, ow, I stabbed my face on a spine, because the diatom's only like 100 microns across, and so most of the things that could eat them basically, you know, they would just swallow it whole. I guess there's a possibility that when they swallowed it, they would get like stabbed internally, and maybe they'd learn not to eat diatoms from being stabbed internally. So, I don't know. I guess that's something to consider. This is still 68. I think the other one wasn't 68, it was 62. I'll have to fix that later. Put like a real in front of it. Real 68. And this is finally a Diplomace. This is the internal view of a Diplomace. That's a nice view of the central nodule. And we'll zoom out and do the whole valve. And maybe we'll do the end first, because I want to get a nice view of the end as well. Normally when we're doing when I'm doing pictures of diatoms for taxonomic purpose, it's usually like the same three things that I focus on: the valve ends, like one view where you can see the valve ends, one view where you can see the central nodule, and then one view that's like the whole valve. And then I do that for the inside and the outside, right? So we can see all of the features, at least in theory. One advantage here is that I zoomed this in a little bit closer as well. And if you look in this view, you can actually see into the areolae, and inside here to the areolae, like up through the costae, and in between them in the striae, there are these little openings which are actually the areolae. And so we can see the internal structure of the areolae a little bit in this view, which I don't think we could see as clearly in the other view. But like to characterize it, basically I need these shots, and then I need to replicate them on the outside as well. So I basically need 6 shots for a diatom to have enough of it characterized cleanly. And then if there's like a special feature, probably would want to get a close-up of that as well. But this is really the primary pieces that you need if you want to describe a diatom. You need to be able to see the things that are important, and the rest of it kind of looks all the same as these things. So because this is usually where the raphe ends. So again, the ending points of the raphe is a little bit more important than the channel itself for most diatoms. So the central nodule is an ending point for this branch, and the terminal end of the raphe ends at the apex in this case. So again, critical to have both of those extensions of it Thank you for the follow, Null Trip. It does look like architecture, and as I mentioned, there's a book somewhere out there where they compare features that you see in diatoms like this to actual man-made structures like the flying buttress and other kinds of components that we use for structural integrity of design. And it turns out that we mimicked diatoms and their internal structure without realizing it. Like, we eventually sort of converged on similar ideas. Yeah. Eventually, the structures become so optimized for perfectly giving them the sort of rigidity that they need and structural integrity that that we end up sort of converging on those ideas. And I mean, if we were smart, we would just start by looking at diatoms and skipping over all of that extra work for us. But we didn't have scanning electron microscopes when a lot of that architecture was being structurally designed. So this is apex. And then I'll do one just sort of like a whole shot here, and I'm also going to turn it a little bit. So maybe 280. That's a pretty good guess. Close enough. And just check real quick that everything's in focus. Let's see, I want to zoom back in. This is sort of my normal behavior for imaging. I want to zoom in closely, get it in focus, and then zoom back out so I can see that it's all clearly in focus. And it's a little over brightened, so I'm going to adjust the contrast and brightness. I could adjust it manually. It just takes longer, really, often longer than this even, to get the contrast and brightness perfect. And it's one of the things that I feel like the test scan really does a great job of most of the time. Sometimes it's just a little dark, or there's something that just needs a little bit more contrast when it's pulling the image together, when it gauges what it needs to do. But it really does a great job of like taking the brightness out and still giving you enough contrast that you can see clearly what you're trying to get. And then if it's a little grainy, which sometimes happens, or it's a little bit like a little too dark or a little too bright, usually I like it to be err on the side of darkness a little bit, in part because it's easier to brighten an image than it is to darken an image, because if you wash out some of the image, you'll never get it back, basically. So this ends up being an okay sort of combination. I'll probably have more opportunities to image the same species on different slides, or on the same slide. Yeah, so it's a sort of one of the great joys I have about being able to showcase diatoms on the scanning electron microscope, because you can see them in a light microscope, and I think they're still really pretty, oftentimes charismatic and still very pretty in the light microscope. But I feel like the scanning electron microscope is the tool of choice for me, for really making people see the sort of beauty in diatoms that I see, in the tiny structures and the intricate nature of these things that are, this whole diatom that we're looking at is maybe 30 microns or 40 microns across. So you get lost in that, and it's a strange world that you're sort of rolling around in with the scanning electron microscope, and I find that um, I've had my own SEM in this lab that I run for I think this is the third year that I've had this scanning electron microscope, and I still feel like I start looking at something and I just get lost in time, and then glance at the clock and I'm like, holy crap. I've been on the SEM for an hour and a half. It doesn't feel like it. From my end, I know like maybe it gets a little boring watching a picture slowly develop in front of your eyes, but like from my end, I always feel like I feel like I've been going for about 20 minutes now or something. Like it feels like almost no time passes. So it just like a vortex of you're lost in this little tiny world with so many fascinating things on it, and it never, for me, it never runs out of that sort of amazement. Like I never get bored with diatoms. I mean, some of them are less amazing than others, I suppose, but like I always feel like I could just get another cool picture if I just zoom around a little bit and find something else. And it's not just the diatoms, so like this giant sponge spicule that's on the bottom part of the image that we have here is another, the sponges, the chrysophytes, the dinoflagellates, the nanofossils of any type. They all just have these really intricate, super amazing kind of structures, and for me, it's just like fascinating to sort of move around in that world. So. Yeah, and this one is super clean. I don't remember who was saying about how clean it looks, but you can see so much of it when there's no mud on it. So my rinsing the samples before we started at least paid off on the slides that we've looked at so far. I may have accidentally gotten rid of a bunch of diatoms when I did that, well, the fossils of them anyway. But if they were going to be covered by mud, we wouldn't be able to image them anyway, so we might as well get rid of the ones that are junk covered. And I don't know, I think this looks like an external view of the same diatom. Yeah. So the diatom that we just saw, we were looking at its inside, and here's its outside. And you can see this one's got a little bit more mud on it. It's got these weird... this one's too muddy for me to image, probably. But it's got these weird little connecting lines on the outside. And you can see these are the pores that we were looking at when we were looking into the inside of the areolae. These are the actual areolae on the valve face. So hopefully we can find one that's not so muddy, but basically has the same structure. I think this diatom I've imaged before in a previous stream, or no, previous time when we've had that species in a different sample. I think it was before I started streaming, so you might see it go by, but with those crazy little grid-like external components. I think it might be in the stream, in the slideshow occasionally. There's a sponge spicule with a encynema, not the diatom that we're looking for, but still kind of a neat one. Yeah, see, its raphe deflects towards the ventral side instead of the dorsal side, or the side that has got a small belly rather than a big round curve. And that right there is the raphe deflecting towards it, which lets us know that it's encynema. I can just tell, for the most part, I can glance at them and I know which way it's going to be before I actually see it, because I'm used to seeing them in the scanning electron microscope now. So, oh, this is this thing that we were looking at from one of the other materials. It's currently called Gomphanema. What's the name of this thing again? Oh, Pedakii. Pedakii? Yeah. But I don't think it belongs in Gomphanema, and I think Yitzi and I are probably going to end up moving it into a new genus, because I don't think this belongs in Gomphanema. It's like half Gomphanema, half Afrosimbella, and I don't know what we should call it, because I don't want to call it like Afrogomphanema or something like that. But it's not it doesn't have any of the characteristics it's supposed to have for gomphanema. So all these sponge spicules, so spongy. Oh, is this one? It is. And it doesn't look like it's covered with junk. And if we zoom in, so this is the central nodule, just as we were seeing before. This is the external view of that same diatom species, not the same specimen, obviously, but and then you can see again, it's got these little, like, they look like little worms or something, but they connect the costi on the outside. And I'm gonna do this because I feel like this is a perfect example of how good my stigmation can be. We could actually get into one of these, get zoomed in on one of these little pores. In a light microscope, this would be a dot. The whole thing would be one dot. Like you'd see is just a little glowing dot. And that's all. You'd have no idea that it's this weird, intricate structure internally. And it's an opportunity for me to either get the stigmation a little bit better or make it a little bit worse. Hopefully it will turn out a little bit better. So stigmation is just the same as it is for a human. If you have glasses for astigmatism, basically, it's the focus of the lens puts it someplace where it's not supposed to be. And in the SEM, this is like giving it little glasses that fix the focus, put it right where we were expecting it to be. And really you can think of it as just like micro focusing. I also have a focus knob here that focuses as well, but these little structures are now as good as I can make them, and the beam intensity's good. I'm going to slow the beam down, and you can see it's a sort of like the silica is a little dissolved on these. That's the sort of gaps that you can see on the in between these pieces. But I think if we just set it like right about here, and I play with the brightness and contrast to get it perfect, we'll make for a neat little photo. And then this will just be the the puncti, or the openings, the areolae. And then I'll just do the same sort of combination, one from the middle, one from the whole valve, and then one where we're looking at the valve ends. And then this species will be effectively characterized enough that we could probably describe it, presuming it's a new species, which probably it is. So this looks good to me. A little dark, but I like a little dark. And I can touch it up a little bit later without any problem. Yeah, not typically accessible to the average diatomist, and I don't think my students understand that very much either. When I'm like, oh, we just spent like 15 hours in the last 2 days on the SEM, that would cost you like $1,000 or more if you were anywhere else. That usually freaks people out. I don't want to freak my students out, but I just tell them like what we just did, that's like $1,000 worth of work. And it's a huge advantage to have it in my own lab and to be able to just throw something down on here and take a look at it. So, do you filter your rinse water to recapture any lost material? No, I just I shake up the sample and then I let it settle. And for these samples, I let it settle about 5 minutes, and then I vacuum off the top of it, which is full of clay, and then I fill it back up with water, and I shake it up again, and then I let it settle for 5 minutes, and I vacuum off all the clay. So I'm just using the settling rates to my advantage. Larger particles will fall through the water more quickly and reach the bottom. The clay will stay in suspension. And so for this sample and for like 3 or 4 of the samples, I actually had to do that about 6 times before there was enough of the clay removed that when I shook it and let it set for 5 minutes, it wasn't cloudy. And so you can still see there's some clay on these. The actual diatom surface still has some clay stuck to it. And if I wanted to try to get those perfectly clean, I could then put it in an ultrasonic water bath, which basically just vibrates really rapidly, and it would shake the diatoms, and it could potentially like shake the clays off of the outside of the diatoms. And then I would have to do another thing where I shook it up and waited for it to settle and pull some of the clays off of it, and then potentially go back and put it in the ultrasonicator and vibrate it. And of course, one of the problems is if you keep doing that, you could shatter diatoms. So there's a positive and a negative sort of aspect of that. But for some of these, I only had to rinse them maybe 2 times. For some of them, of the 7 stubs that I made for today, some of them I needed to actually rinse them out, like I said, 6 or 7 times to get all of the clay out. So if there's a lot of clay, but the recapture is, I just sort of let it go down the sink into our sediment trap, basically. There's enough material in there that I never need to worry about it very much. It's not like I'm desperate for diatoms. There's billions of them in one container. So I'm not too worried about losing the material, even though it's basically impossible to recover it, to get it back. I also only processed like a quarter or less of every one of the original raw material. So I still have all the raw material in mud form, like unprocessed, sitting in my lab, and could always just make another sample from that. So that's a positive is with working with diatoms, is that I almost never need to worry about like, oh, I only have so much material. Normally I just have so much that it's never a problem to lose a little bit of it. It's like, I probably tossed a couple 100,000 diatoms down the sink, but there's so many more fossil diatoms in the samples that it won't have any negative consequence. So I've already got everything where I want it. I'm just going to collect that picture, and I can come back and see what the channel has been saying. I can figure out my controls. Okay. What does that say? You are also a researcher. I think you were talking to Pacific Plankton, but she is not a researcher. Yeah. I'm reading in French. She knows the subject because she spends a lot of time hanging out with me, I think, for diatoms at least. Also, I took 4 years of French in high school, and another 3 I tested into in college. So, and I still remember most of it. But don't make me say it, because my speaking French is terrible. Peter says, I'm glad Twitch has more than screaming gamers. It's a very interesting and helpful channel. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'm also an American. There's a lot of great STEM content in Twitch, if you know where to look. And Pacific Plankton gave you a bunch of links for other microscope streamers with various levels of screaming, most of them without much, right? And Admata, it's totally fine. I don't really care if you mention other streamers. We're not control freaks in this channel about that sort of thing. So no matter the cost of that microscope, you share everything you find with it with your students, with us, with the scientific community. Yeah, that's my plan. If you look at my Twitter or my Instagram, for example, I like to showcase a lot of that artwork, the photographs that I take, and then recolor the images so people can see them. There's a value to it. And typically the only ones that I don't post everything, so you can follow the stream and see me collect these images. And then typically I just post ones that I think look cool. I don't usually post everything. My Instagram would just be overwhelmed if that were the case. But it's definitely, I try to get the ones that look the coolest out there where people can see them so they can identify what diatoms are. So, do I speak French? Are you talking to me or are you talking to them? Clearly they're speaking French. I also read French, but I don't speak it. There's a lot of times our minds are blown with what we learn here. Oh, of course, Andalore, thank you. And Andalore hangs out here all the time, so they know what they're talking about. This is the external view of the central nodule. Center. Close. And I'm going to, as I mentioned, do one picture from out here and also one picture where we're focused on the Raphy end so that we can see it. And everything should already be in focus. I don't need to mess with the focus because I only moved at a little distance, right? So everything is still here. It looks like it's still cleanly in focus and everything else is set, so I can just take another picture. That's one nice part, is I don't have to spend a lot of time refocusing, re-imaging. It's just there, right? Let's see, I'm almost caught up. You mess up your genders are the worst part of any foreign language to me. I can never remember what gender I'm supposed to make, a grain of rice or a table leg, or, I don't even know. Because we don't use that sort of language in English. And for a while I was trying to learn German using what's the app? Duolingo. And I would just, because I already felt like I had a good enough handle on French. And Duolingo is a great program for this sort of stuff. But the problem was, I couldn't remember the genders. And then, when it became important where it would grade you, poorly for not getting something right, it was always I stuck the wrong gender on something. And then I just got frustrated with it because I don't want to memorize what gender everything in front of me is. It's too challenging. I feel like it's particularly challenging in German because they also have a neutral, non-gendered version of some words, and I can't figure out okay, it's male or female, or it might be a neither. If you got a neither, why don't you just use neither for everything? Why you gotta make it hard for us? So I don't think German people would be upset with me if I used the wrong gender, and probably the French people wouldn't be mad if you used, or French-speaking people wouldn't be mad if you used the wrong gender, but Duolingo cares, so it would make me mad, right? Make it plural. Yeah, that's an approach. Except for Duolingo won't let you just make it plural. So you could probably get away with it in speaking or in writing, but the program would just totally cramped my interest in continuing, because I just didn't want to memorize all that. It was hard enough memorizing all the words. I got to also memorize its gender. Just turn me off from it. So also I get busy, so sometimes I have a little opening where I try to do something, and then life gets busy and I can't do it anymore. So this is really cool view of that diatom. Turned out really well. You can see the Raphy hooks and ends very, very quickly after it bends. And also there's a little area here with no striae on it, or no areolae, just some little almost formed areolae. this is the apex close. And then I'm going to do one more where we got the whole valve. And I think it's easiest if I go this direction. Still need to go farther. And I think I just went a little too far. Oh, not that far back. Maybe I just didn't go far enough. I'm just messing with it. Okay, we'll do this somewhere in between. And that probably screwed up all of my focus. Something like that. It's a cute little diatom. Itzy's going to be happy with these shots. Itzy's my colleague who does the Diplomace, and I think she's really going to like these shots. So, I mean, I like them, so I feel like she's going to like them. Like, every one of those photos was a good one. Let's see. What did I miss? No German will care about genders. Yeah, that's how I feel about it, but Duolingo cared. That's where I got, like, frustrated. I love to use images similar to these in art. Yeah, me too. Junkyard Tuning says, so all of these multicellular algae with cell walls. Junkyard, they're all single-celled organisms, and this is their cell wall that we're looking at. So they're algae, and this is the actual like cell wall for that organism. The insides are variously removed by hydrogen peroxide or nitric acid or whatever. They were already dead by the time that I got access to them, but the organic material's all been removed. The clays have been removed from the sediments that they were collected in, and you're just looking at the cell wall of a single-celled organism, not multicellular at all. They're all single-celled organisms. This is the amazing part of it, is that these structures are created by an organism, and this is just a single cell. A girl who hangs in another chat mentioned loving these microscopy streams, and I'm so glad to stuck around in the creative area is usually where I hang. Oh, maybe it was somebody that we know, like Little Chook or Miss Daisy D, my regular like streamer arts friends. Actually, I have a few of them: Estrella and John J. Ranzella, like a whole bunch of artsy people I hang out with. So, yeah. I know there are some people who arrange diatoms to make art using tiny tweezers and probes. No reason why you cannot do it just digitally. Edmonta, that's actually how I do it. I will get rid of the background by just removing it in... You can remove it in PowerPoint very easily, just by clicking like remove background on an image. It will get rid of all of the junk around the outside edge, and then you could arrange them however you wanted to. And I've done that before. And I probably don't have any of that I could show you, but the next picture I will dig through my files and see if I can find one for you and figure out how to share it. But I made like bats for talks. Like I made the diatoms into the shape of bats. And I also did like a cactus scene once, but only in SEM. I do have a micromanipulator as well. And so we could rearrange them using the micromanipulator, which is what they do when they rearrange them. But mine's not automated, so you have to do everything manually, which means it's actually really kind of tedious to use for anything other than just pulling samples apart and looking at them, arranging them how I want to see things. But so that's what we used it for and are using it for my micromanipulator. I suppose if I had a student who was really interested in arranging some slides into artwork, they could. They have access. My students have access to it, but I would rather do it in Photoshop. It's so much faster and easier. There's sort of an artistry to the sort of patient work that they do, but I have a busy life and don't have that kind of time, generally speaking. So maybe if I get old and retire, I'll just sit around making diatoms into art. I think that would be fun. What did I find? What's in my sample? That's not a diatom, that's here. I don't know what this is. What is it, and what is it doing in my sample? Is it a diatom? I don't think so. It's got holes. It's off to a good start with the holes, but I don't know what this is. I have no idea what that is, actually. Probably another piece of sponge. I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. It also looks like maybe it could be... I don't know, it's too small to be probably too small to be an ostracod, but it kind of giving me an ostracod vibe on it with the shape. I don't know. Let's zoom in this thing. Oh, here's an external view of Cyclostephanos. So I forgot to show you what was the characteristic that breaks it into Cyclostephanos, which seems like meaningless to everybody except for Diatomist, which is on the mantle. So this is the valve face over here. This is the spine. These ones just have little tiny pieces of spines. You can see that the spines occur at the row where it goes from 2 to many pores. I mentioned that before. That's normal. That's right where the, think of the diatom as like a bottle cap. It's right where the bottle cap starts to bend is where the spines go. And then this is the opening for the mantle photoportula. So little openings for the mantle photoportula. We saw them as tubes on the Stephanodiscus. On the Cyclostephanos, these don't have tubes. But that little hole, the bigger one that's right there, it's right in the middle of this sort of thick piece of silica. So that's how I can identify it so quickly. It's in a different position than these other holes. But what you see is this branch right here, where it branches, this sort of like splits. For some reason, that's a thing that separates this from Stephanodiscus. That doesn't happen in Stephanodiscus at all, ever. And in fact, the costi, the thickened parts of the diatom, stop before they get to the mantle all the way. So the branching that happens on these, and also the fact that the costi go all the way out to the mantle and all the way to the end of the mantle, that doesn't happen on Stephanodiscus. Stephanodiscus, they'll stop here and they don't continue past it. So it seems like totally meaningless, but that's actually something that makes them different enough that they got their own genus. And it seems like a relatively stable characteristic. So we're in the middle of this like pile of stuff. And also beam intensity is like crazy weird. There we go. What's this? There's a piece of a Diplomace hanging out right here. You can see it? I can tell it's Diplomace from the structure of the valve and everything, but there's a big Cyclostephanos. Cyclostephanos. These are all sponge spicules. The little, like, tubes and spines and toothpick-shaped things. That is an amphora. That's also an amphora. That's the internal and external views. Here's another Diplomace. It's the same one we saw before, I think. Just a small version of it. That's a big Encynema. Here's one, and here's one. I think this is a Gomphanema. Yep, this is the Pedocii. I was calling like a unicorn Gomphanema. There's the horn on it. Let's see if I can get that in focus for you. So it has like a little horn right there, a spine. All these really strange East African diatoms. And this is the same one we saw before still. A lot of the structures are very similar. So sometimes from the internal view it's kind of hard to tell. I was mostly going by the shape. But I got some really nice images of that, so. I like it in the darkness on the edge of this because this clump over here is glowing and it's making everything else adjust to it. And now it's making everything else look dark by comparison. Also, it's charging, which is not helpful. So if I tried to take a picture of anything near it, it probably would create a stripe going through my sample. So it's like just a giant clump of things that were all lumped together. Could be fish poop or something like that. Here's one of these things. Pedocii again, I think. Go. This is what makes them very different. So their raphy ends do this weird sort of antenna-like coil, and then the slot that's right here is the internal expression of the stigma. And I've got like 100 photos of these now, so I probably don't need any more of it. Another one of these giant. This one's actually really sort of fat. Diplomace. Structurally, it's pretty similar internally. I don't know if it's the same species. I'm gonna creep around here a little bit and see if we can find anything that's a little different. Yeah, that one's a different one. A little tiny guy. It's so dark in here. Yeah, that's a different Diplomace. Shape's different, and internally they look a little different. So we need to find something that's kind of in this size range and shape. But I want one that's like not got junk on it. And also we'll need to find the outside of it. This amphora down here. Both valve raphy are on the same side of the frustule, just sort of shaped like a loaf of bread. Could also be I'm hungry and it's 3 o'clock. It's getting close to lunch. Well, my lunch for Saturday. This is a big piece of volcanic ash. These are all sponge spicules. That's a phytolith. It's all sponge spicules, these sort of big, like hot dog shaped things. You can see they all have really different, really intricate spines and different kind of surface structures. Sort of a neat collection of sponge spicules. If I was really into sponges, this would be a great sample to come characterize a whole bunch of these. And my colleague Mike McLew, who I work with in East Africa frequently, has a new student who's a sponge expert. So it could be that we will come back and image some of these at a later date. We'll have like a sponge spicule imaging stream. Let's try another stub. I've only really touched like 3 of them so far. And I didn't think I would be able to get through all of these when I started. But I just wanted to kind of prep all of them together. So I usually like to just keep them all together on a stub. Here's a big one. That is a huge Diplomace. It's maybe 150 microns across. Yeah? Something like that. It's a really big one. It's over brightened and out of focus, but I can fix those. I went the wrong way. Focus is fixed, the angle is fixed. Composition is, for the most part, fixed. I'm gonna set the speed and the beam intensity. And the brightness. Hopefully that will give us an image that's nice and clear. It'll always be a little bright in these areas that are here for whatever reason. They're a little over brightened, but they won't be quite as bad. And then I can collect a picture and see what chat's been up to. It seems like we have some really good conversation going on today. Again, a little dark, but I like dark. I think I could fix it in Lightroom later. So I'll just go ahead and collect that and hop back into chat. Greetings from Germany. I'm in Munich. Ah, hello, Voyage Pass. Greetings. I don't know, Guten Tag, right? It's evening there for you. Very late in the evening for you. I was just looking at some of my SEM picks from my PhD, and so many that are that aren't as clear as I wanted. And I was working at 3 kilovolts on an instrument that was 15 years old, and we had some limitations. So I was constantly working at the extremes of the SEM magnification. Yeah. I actually probably don't need to be working at 30 kilovolts. That's just where I leave it sometimes because I can zoom in on little stuff and I don't like going through the recalibration process. You can see there's something going on in this slide. There's a little bit of a charge, but you Googled? Well, I'm an expert in diatoms, so I know that they're all single-celled. May you post a link to some diatom art? Absolutely. Yeah, you can also join the Discord, and there's lots of art posting that goes on in there as well. Oh, Heckle, yeah, everybody knows Heckle, yeah. Oh, that's cool. We French are perfectly aware of the fact that French language is torture. English is torture. You know, we're all on the same page with our language being torturous. It's just the cross-communicating part. So you can see that there's some charging going on this sample, which is actually a result of whatever's over here behind these things. We should create a group of artists loving diatoms. Artists loving diatoms here. Yeah, I got a lot of cool people hanging out. This is a modern sample. It's was collected by my friend Itzi, and so it's not, none of the stuff is living. Everything here is dead, but it was collected live when it was originally collected, because she's actually harvesting the DNA for many of these, and then we're trying to use that to better characterize the species that we see. So how many are there on Earth approximately? I hope you mean species of diatoms and not how many people who love diatoms, because I don't know the answer to this second one. And if you mean how many total diatoms, I wouldn't even be able to imagine what that number is. It's a ridiculously high number of diatoms living on planet Earth. Oh, this is not 68 either. I need to make this like 71. And Big Diplomace. And I'm going to hopefully find a better one than this. It's not so charged up, but is the same giant elliptical shaped diatom. Somewhere else on the slide so we can also get an external view. But you can see how big that one is. It should be easy for us to find if there's another one. Oh, here's another giant one. A different giant one. And I don't think this is the same as either of the previous two. And this one actually has a valvacopula, which is like another layer internally that they build. And very cool. So it's got a little clay in it. But in this case, I don't think we can be choosers. I'm just going to take it. And later on, I'll come back and figure out if there's any other in this sample. Or maybe I'll just prep some more samples using these and I'll try to sonicate them. So what do I want to do? 180? Pretty close. This was big and very rounded, unlike the other one that we had, which was big and elliptical. And I know it sounds like I'm just giving childlike names to them, but I don't know their species, and I don't know that they have species names, so that's sort of cool. Kind of the fun part of my job when we look at stuff from East Africa is that most of it's not described, so... Maybe because I don't think I'll be able to get time to actually show some of the photoshopped artwork that I did with Diatoms. I'll just post them into the Discord. So if you're really interested in seeing me manipulating things to look like bats or cactuses or whatever else, just drop in there. That way I don't waste potential time for chatting with people. My streams are scheduled to go to from 1 to 3, and I almost always drag it out till 3:30 or 4. But it's really hard to sort of like keep up with chat and collect the images at the same time. So I'm just doing my best. Okay. How many diatoms are there on Earth, like species-wise? I don't know. Estimates are something between 1 and 2 million species on Earth, but those are estimates. So that's like with about 90% unknown, so which may be where we are with respect to species. So, oh, you have a Heckle Drawings as a tattoo. Cool, and a trilobite. Oh, and a horseshoe crab. That's a lot of cool tattoos you got. These lack mitochondria. They have DNA, but there's like 2 different kinds of DNA. You really start asking about the soft stuff, Junkyard, and I'm going to have to get somebody else in here to talk about it because I study the skeletal part. And my friend Eatsy does all of the like DNA stuff. And as wise as I might seem about some things, I do not know most anything about DNA. So for diatoms especially. So yeah, you can check out my Instagram. That's cool. Yeah, these are all probably new species. All these Diplomace are probably new species. Are diatoms disappearing like other living species? Is it possible to know that, considering we're still discovering new diatoms all the time? They evolve very rapidly, like thousands of years probably, and it's hard to say for sure whether they are disappearing. I would actually argue they probably aren't. They're not impacted by temperature very much, and but there are some species that are probably going extinct. Just probably not quite the same impact as other things. We're doing a lot to support them by throwing a bunch of extra nutrients into the environment, and diatoms primarily use those nutrients. They're not being as productive as they were in some parts of the world, though. So that part is true. I don't know that we're losing species from like climate change. It's like hard to tell. Some of them maybe. Jackie Kennedy's hat. Oh, you're gonna have to go soon? That's okay. I know you're you always have to stop everything you're doing in the middle of a Saturday, and I really appreciate it. And hello, Dangling. Welcome back. Only thing I know about diatoms is how great they are at keeping ants out of my house. Yeah, they use the diatomaceous earth to get rid of insects and things and slugs. How many diatoms would be in a teaspoon of diatomaceous earth? It's probably billions. Like, I'm not underestimating that. It's probably billions. You could calculate the concentration and then weigh it. You could probably figure it out. When doing metabar coding, every diatom is cryptic to me. Yeah, sorry, they're all cryptic to us as well. I think there's a lot of unknowns. Should be EC71. Big round Diplomace. And I'm hoping we find at least one. I think this is the one we took a picture of the first time. And I think it's different than this one. See how it's elliptical? This one's like big oval. And the previous really big one that we had was even more narrow and elliptical shaped than this one. So, and then there was the little guy. I think there's the 4 of them at least there. The sample's got a lot of internal views. Here's an internal, there's an internal. And I think this is the one that we imaged the first time, still, based on shape. That's a Cyclostephanos, which we visited. All these little toothpick-shaped things here are sponge spicules. That's an Aganthanema. I think it's Africanum. Oh, it just has one stigma, and it has biseriate striae that go to single rows, which is kind of neat. The question is, does this thing have a subtle little spine at the end? And the answer is I can't see very well to know. But it's good to know that it's in this sample, and I could come back to it. I think that's a Placanese. Yep, Placanese. And there's another one of these big Cirrellas. A different shaped one, less curvy. And there's a big phytolith. That's a long cell of a phytolith right there. So this is silica that grows from inside of plants. And then the plants die, or they get burned in a fire, and then bits of that get basically dumped into the environment, and usually that's what dissolves in the water and probably generates a lot of the silica that diatoms use to grow in lakes and streams. There's a gyrostigma right there. And also a bunch of little stuffs way out in the background I can see. I'm just not focusing on them because I'm kind of looking around for an external view of one of those big Diplomace. So right on the edge of the slide, that's what this structure right there is. There's something. Oh, little one. An external view of the little one. That's interesting. There's a little tiny diatom on this diatom. What is this even? It's like a Celophora, maybe? I don't know. I call everything Celophora, I guess. I'm being accused of that. But that looks like a Canopia, actually. I think it is really a Celophora. It's got a little Celophora buddy. It's kind of dissolved. Otherwise, I think I would image it. If you're really interested in seeing living organisms in light microscope, you should check out Pacific Plankton Stream. And I usually hang out there. I think I've gotten almost all of them that I've watched for like the last 5 or 6 months. I maybe missed a couple because I had some family issues or something, but yeah, her streams are on Mondays and on Thursdays, and she streams from a light microscope and collects water from the Pacific Ocean and looks at the plankton that are in it, not just diatoms, but other things. And so we know that one, we know the shape, and we also know the those little lines between the areolae. So it's like a characteristic component that allows us to know for sure we're looking at that same species, or if not the same species, something really similar, right? Let's see, if I slow that down, we can see it's still a little overexposed, but I can work on that. I think you can see in the structure of these pores are the same as the ones that we were seeing before. So I just wanted to get a picture of this because it's got a bit of the girdle, and we didn't really see that in the previous view. So I'm just trying to get it centered the way I want. And then I'm going to beam intensity 7, speed 7, oops, and that actually looks okay. Take that picture, we'll come back. I have this, if you want to follow Pacific Plankton, just a little direct link for her. I'm up very early for important things, like my stream, you mean, Jurgling? It's 2 p.m. there. How the heck is it 2 p.m.? Are you like in Newfoundland or something? That's a weird. You hope we find some diatoms on Mars, Win Benny? Me too. That would be great. I would love to study Martian diatoms. And I hope if we find them, they contact me about it. Because, well, I've got a bunch of probably more famous friends. I would love to have that opportunity. And hopefully I do a good job with them. Space diatoms. What is the oldest fossil diatoms found so far? They've found them into the Cretaceous. So, indisputably, diatoms, they're found in some marine sediments from the Cretaceous. So they're basically as old as the dinosaurs. And then things before that that kind of look diatom-like, but may not be diatoms. So, but indisputable, like definitely a diatom Cretaceous. I have small friends. Yeah, it was like a little tiny guy. There's always some little diatom hanging out on a big diatom. Recidica with the squad command. Thank you. Oh, Chicago. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, going the other time way. I was thinking 4 p.m. Yeah. Nope. And they've evolved very rapidly over that time frame, Mandalore. So that's another issue, is that, like maybe 2 million species in less than 200 million years, right? That's a lot of diatom species on planet Earth. You can even see those little tiny pores in there perfectly. The same structure, all of them. It's so neat. And I really like these little crossbar things that are on here. My favorite. I'm just going to call this crossbar. Diplomace. Let's see if we can find another one. And then a nice external view of one of these bigger Diplomace that were hanging out in this sample. And I think that's the one we already imaged that. I'm creeping back over some of the same old areas where I was. I was kind of going around the outside edge in a half circle. Oh, this is a cool, that's a nice view of the internal one. This thing right here is big Somatoplura, or it's a Cirrella. It's monster in size. I used to remember the name of this one, but I've forgotten it to species. I have pictures of it somewhere from the light microscope with its actual name on it. I just forget what it's called. Hidden down here is one of these. It's dissolved and broken. But you can see this sort of like separate structure in this middle canal area, thickened canal area, and it causes these striae in the middle to look different in the light microscope. One of these times what I should do is have some light microscope images I can sort of show of the same ones that we're looking at in the SEM, so you can kind of like get an idea of what does it look like in a light microscope to us versus an SEM. I think that would be kind of fun. You could also just show up and check out my night streams, which I do occasionally, where we look at diatoms, and you could see some of these, and I could probably dig out these same samples and look through them so we could sort of check out not only these, but you could see what sponges would look like in the light microscope. It would be kind of fun. All right. I am just going to turn really briefly to step 4 and see what's on there. See if there's any big Diplomace with the external part sticking out towards us, or whether I need to do some special work with this material, because it's got a lot of detritus, sort of sands and silts in it. I just want to make sure this sample was particularly thick. And then maybe we'll find one good thing to image on this stub. And then I'll start thinking about shutting it down for the day. We'll see. Because I do need to eat lunch. And I've got to prepare. I've got an extra lecture this week again. I've been helping my postdoc Chad with his microfossils class. And oh, that would have been a cool one, except for it's broken. And I think this is that little this Gomphanema again, but it's dissolved. I've been helping him with his microfossils class, teaching the diatom part, and so that'll happen on Monday. I'm giving another lecture on how we use diatoms for paleo environmental indicators, and I'm primarily a paleoecologist. I sort of moonlight as a taxonomist because I work in places where there's nobody looking at stuff or few people looking at the stuff, and I can't really publish all of my work with names like diatom SP1 and SP2 and SP3, so it becomes really critical that I kind of learn taxonomy and get good at it. And when I've come across new things, to put them in the right place if they haven't been put there yet. So we're sort of working on I want that. Is that an internal view? Yeah, and it's crusty. So I sort of do taxonomy as well, but it's not my primary focus. At least not most of the time. Maybe as I start to slow down in my research life, I'll just, like I said, I'll just do things that I sort of can tinker around with, but I'm not there yet. So Let's see. Let's look at 5. Since how 4 wasn't very compelling. Pretty sparse, but also cleaner. Right here. Nope, I think it's a Placanese. For sure. Placanese. It's kind of enormous. Also Placanese. This is the Raphid valve, and that one was the Araphid valve, and it's similarly large, so probably the same species. It's a diatom. It's broken. It's fractured right down the middle. So it's just being held up by something. So it's the back end of it's still together. The rest of it's been crushed by something. Let's just hit 6 and see. Kind of similar quality as the previous one. There's that big Cirrella or Metapleura or something. Haven't seen any of our monster Diplomace. At least not at first pass. That's a little one. That's a different species than the one we saw before, I believe. So it doesn't have those sort of articulate little things on the outside. But it's also dissolved a bit. It's a big chunk of something. A little clumpy. This is our little horned guy. That is one, but it's covered with junk, I can tell already. This is Cyclostephanos. See how big they get? It's like 100 microns across. Almost the size of some marine diatoms. This crazy looking sponge spicule. There's barbs coming off of it in every direction. Maybe that'll be a good thing to stop with. So let's see, I'm going to get it rotated. I'm going to fix the focus. And then zoom out. Compose. Crazy looking sponge spicule. Speed 7, beam intensity 7, image quality looks good. And I'll just take that picture. And then I think that'll be it for pictures today. Let's see, what's going on out here? Yes, life, love, joy. We are looking at stuff in the scanning electron microscope. And Recidica, thank you for hanging out. Devil and Mrs. J, hello. Somebody should give her a shout out, but it should be me, I think, probably. Because my helper, Pacific Plankton, had to go. Has anyone tried to train AI to search for diatoms on the SEM? Yes. Not on the SEM, but in light microscope, probably. What is the goal? Largely, I'm looking at the diatoms to try to describe them from East Africa. So we're looking to describe new species. And Naptonium, newt. Is naptonium the secret element of taking naps? CJ, SideQuest, thank you for the follow. And this will be the last photo that I collect today. So let's see if I can find somebody that we could raid. That would be great. As usual, I like to end my stream with a raid. Hopefully carry some of my community into another community. And because we have so many artists in the chat, I think what we'll do today is raid one of my artist friends. So I think that sounds like a good idea. And why don't we try DM Fish? I want to see what she's doing, so I don't totally totally mess things up for her. She said she accidentally on purpose had a big cup of coffee. So let's see what she's got going on. Looks like she's doing artwork, so we will raid her. Looking forward to this. Thank you everybody for hanging out, and I'll be on again. I stream from the scanning electron microscope on Wednesdays and Saturdays for most weeks. So next Wednesday, 1 to 3 Eastern time, and next Saturday probably again. I do some evening streams occasionally for my light microscope at home, and I should point out that this week I have a really special treat, which is we're doing a stream with me, Pacific Plankton, and Constababble as panelists on a panel hosted by my friend Del Maximum, and all of us are science or science sort of naturalist streamers, and we're going to be talking about science communication and a little bit about streaming on different types of media. If you're interested in checking out other microscope streamers, there's been some hosts in the channel, the squad command, but especially Del Maximum and Pacific Plankton, who are people that I regularly hang out in their channels when they stream from the light microscope. So you should definitely give them a follow or check them out if you haven't already. And let's see, I'm going to, if I can get this to start typing, we're going to start the raid. So we're going to be raiding art streamer DM Fish, and she looks like she's just sketching. So she'll probably be excited to have a nice crowd of people come in and check out her streams. So hopefully people will come along with the raid with us. For all the people that followed Neptunium Side Quest, Recitica, Wind Bunny, Ms. Scatterbrain, Null Trip, Raul, there's like a whole long list of people that followed us today. I want to say thank you. I really appreciate people that that are willing to sort of hang out and check out our stream, and hopefully you guys will be excited about DM Fish. So that's it for today, and I'll hopefully see you guys on Sunday. It's 5 p.m. start time in Eastern Time if you're in the Eastern Time Zone, Pacific Time 2 p.m., and we'll be in Del Maximum stream, so you can just type in Del Maximum into the search, and you ought to be able to catch them. Okay, otherwise, I'm going to take off now. We'll see you.
Harass you, huh? Diatoms, he's attacking. Welcome. Hi. You've come in very odd time. Beginning of a stream where I'm drawing Cthulhu Yoda, but that's fine. Do you know what each of those... I also love Cthulhu. I don't know if I've met a lot of people who don't like Cthulhu. It's fun. Do you know what each of those, like all of your emotes, I'm assuming, are based off of a real? Do you know what all of them are? Can you tell me? I'm about to embarrass myself. City with Cthulhu is like, yes, I agree. Use Mia. Use pronounce the TH. That attempt to that one looks like a record. Cyclotella Meneginiana.